Hey, Nosy Joe here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to work on the GMC Sierra 1500 again today. I think I did a video a while back working on the, I think putting a new hitch on it. Well, today I'm going to put new disc brake rotors on it. The reason why is for a while now, as I apply the brakes in the pedal, I kind of get a pulsating feel. It's actually gotten so worse now that the truck kind of shakes for a bit, initially putting on the brakes, and then it kind of smooths out. Still stops fine. So I went ahead and bought pads and rotors. We'll see if I actually need the pads or not, but I think the rotors are warped, and so we'll get those taken care of, and I'll show you how to do it. All right, hope you enjoy it. This is a 2009 GMC Sierra 4.8, but the steps I take should apply to any GM truck directly, and about any vehicle with disc brakes up front, would apply this general steps I'm taking. But if you got a GMC truck or a Chevy Silverado half-ton, just follow right along, and this will help you out a lot, I hope. First thing you want to do is take your center cap off, and I do that with a 7/8 deep well socket by hand. You don't need to use a wrench on this because you'll probably break these lug nut covers off. But that's 7/8, which happens to also be the same size as the lug nuts. So let me get my impact wrench. So I'm just going to break these loose a little bit before I jack up the truck, because especially on your front tires, or if you can't do it when it's in the air, you're going to have to drop it back down on the ground anyway, so because the wheel just wants to spin on you. Alright, so I left a couple of them decent so it doesn't damage the lug studs. That's about all you gotta do before you get the truck up in the air. Alright, now I got the truck up in the air a little bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the lug nuts off. Alright, there's all 6 of them. Take the wheel off. Alright, next step is to get on the bolts that hold your caliper on. And there's 2 of them holding it on. One right here and one right here. And they're going to be a 19mm. This really shows my lack of tools. All I had was an open end, no boxed end, and no 19mm sockets. Full disclosure, I'd actually sprayed these with some lubricant and anti-corrosion stuff last time I had the wheels off when I rotated them, because I knew this brake job was coming up. So luckily these came out without too much trouble. I did use my lead hammer, but threads were real clean and no issues. So now that I got the caliper out of the way, I wanted to do a shot here where you can see my brake pads. So here's the rotor here, and then here's my pads. So my pads actually look really thick. I'm not sure what the spec is on that, but we're nowhere near close needing to replace those. So I'm just going to replace the rotor only. But if I was just doing a pad job, now I have access to the pads, I'd be able to do them right now. But since I want to take the rotor off because I think it's warped, I got to get to these 2 bolts here and take this whole bracket off. Make that a little bit more clear. This bolt and this bolt to get the caliper bracket off that holds the brake shoes or brake pads. Alright, so these bolts that hold on this brake pad bracket to the spindle, I guess, is 18mm. So luckily I had 18mm deep well. There was 2, I already got 1, and so then that all comes off. Just like that, these 2 bolts here. Alright, so that's that. Now we'll go after the rotor. Okay, next in taking the rotor off, there's just one, as far as I can tell, kind of set screw that's a T30 Torx. I don't know if you can see that, T30 Torx. I was able to break that loose without holding anything. I just held it with my hand and was able to break it loose, so hopefully it comes off that easy for you. As I'm seeing the rotor come loose here, I'm thinking that's all it's going to be. So that one T30, and then this, all of this will. All right. So there's my old rotor, and not super proud of my new ones. I checked different places and ended up just getting this set off of eBay. It was drilled and all that. I don't know if I needed all that, but I was able to get this off of eBay for both sides and pads, which I don't need, for 150 bucks. And at the local parts place, these things were $90 a piece with no pads. So thought that was a pretty good deal. Need to make sure that my alignment bolt lines up probably with this hole here that's not threaded, would be my guess. And then I would just put this back on, and we're ready to put things back together. All right. A couple things I forgot to mention when I was over on the passenger side is when you go to put your caliper back on, it's going to be a pretty tight fit if you don't kind of push these pistons in a little bit. So I just use a C-clamp and I push those in. That gives you a little bit more wiggle room trying to get these back on. So having said that, you need to pump up your brakes with your brake pedal before you put the car in drive or reverse again. So you want to make sure you got a good pedal feel, because you'll have to pump it a few times to get the pistons back up on the brake pads to the rotor. Other thing I wanted to mention, good practice is putting some type of anti-seize lubricant on your bolts when you put it back together. One other thing was when you got your bracket off with your pads, take these out and re-grease them. So that's a good practice. You need some fresh grease on these so that your pads and your caliper can kind of float and not always be dragging on your rotor. Because if you don't do that, that's one reason your rotors can get hot and get warped in the first place. So I just put some just some wheel bearing grease. Pull those out, give them a little dip, get that in there so that it's in good shape. This one's actually got a torn seal. Really should replace that, but I'm not going to, because I don't think there's really no evidence of anything getting in there. But make sure you do that. Make sure you use anti-seize, and those are some tips to make it easier. All right, hope that helps you. Again, check your pads. You might not need to. This truck only has about 64,000 miles, and it didn't need them. Don't really know why the rotor's warped, but I think they did. So we'll get this back together. I think I'm also gonna pump some fresh fluid out here to the caliper just to get better brake feel. And the truck's going on 14 years old now, and probably about time for a brake fluid flush. So I'm gonna do that, put it back together. Hope that helped you guys. Later.